Mavericks, it's their first game since a report surfaced that Jimmy Butler is having issues with Brett Brown about his role in the 76ers offense. Butler sat out Wednesday night's loss and is out again tonight. Griff, stop me if you've heard this before. Jimmy Butler not happy about his situation. Why is this different than any other time we've heard this from Jimmy Butler?
Well, if you've just suspend the fact that it's Jimmy Butler, you don't think about what's happened to him historically in the past to get to this point. This specific episode is not that unique. This happens often. Players will challenge coaches in meetings during film, etc. It just doesn't get out. To me, what's significant about this issue is not that it's Jimmy saying he's uncomfortable with the offense, because I would bet Jimmy's had conversations with Brett Brown, where he shared these thoughts privately as well. He's probably told Brett when he came over, look, I run hot. This is how I work. I'm really competitive. I'm going to burst out once in a while. Come back at me the same way, because I know he wants you to push back just as hard. What's meaningful to me is it got out. And that, to me, is representative of the fact that there's been some discord there already. They've already had issues with the fit of Joel and Ben Simmons a little bit. They've had issues along the way where people aren't necessarily happy with the fit and role. And when you're 25-14 and you're playing as well as they're playing, it's unusual to have that level of discontent.
I agree with you. I'm a little bit worried that it got out. But we've seen the situation before with Jimmy. Some stuff has got out. My biggest thing that worries me, though, is this is Jimmy's third stop. Normally in baseball, they say 3 strikes and you're out. And he's had problems, whether it be with young players, coaches, other star players, at every single stop. There was rumors that him and Derrick Rose had a little bit of a riff. Same thing with him and Karl Anthony Towns and Wiggins. Now we see this here with the coaching staff. We see the situation with him and Embiid a little bit. Seems like they're going back and forth. I just see a lot of smoke. And for somebody that is going to be up for a maximum extension, you would think that Jimmy Butler would be on his best behavior. If I'm some of the other teams in the league and I'm thinking about throwing max dollars at this guy, that has to be a red flag. I have to start to consider maybe this isn't the guy. Maybe I go after somebody that's less talented but more tolerable in my locker room, because money just makes you more of what you already are. This guy has been here 6 weeks and he's already cutting up, talking about he needs the ball, challenging the coaching staff. What do you do and what do you think is going to happen if you give him $200 million? He might cut a slam full.
No, and I think that's true, and certainly because it's Jimmy, you do take into account the history. But I do think it's incredibly common for these conversations to take place and for players to be uncomfortable with their role, particularly when the fit of the pieces is as wonky as it is in Philly. Everybody wants things to be a little different. You remember earlier, Joel was not happy that he was playing so far away from the rim, and the reason they were doing that was a la Brook Lopez, they were trying to open the floor for Ben. So there's already those seeds of discontent. So what Jimmy then ends up doing is he makes the situation seem much worse. But I think there have been several times in the league where you thought it was a brush fire and there wasn't even smoke. And if it wasn't Jimmy Butler, I don't think this is even a story. But because it's Jimmy, that's the story. And to me, the story is it got out and they're unhappy winning this much.
I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me, because he had the problem with Karl Anthony Towns in Minnesota and who was the guy. And now we see the situation here. I can't be used like, whoa. When you're not the guy, you have to figure out how to play with the guy. It's the same thing that we experienced in Cleveland. Kevin Love was not happy with his role. He didn't challenge Blatt. He didn't challenge T. Lue. He eventually figured out how to play with LeBron James because he was not the best player on that team. I don't know if Jimmy Butler has gotten that memo that Embiid is the best player on that team. And that worries me, once again, if I'm another team or if I'm a GM thinking about throwing this guy money. Like, if you're the Lakers and you're going after Jimmy Butler, is he going to get in line with LeBron James dominating the ball out here? Like, these are all the questions that you have to ask yourself when you bring Jimmy Butler in here. He is costing himself money by the day.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with the costing himself money thing. If it gets out that Philadelphia does not offer him max, it will be a very bad sign. And other teams around the league will wonder what's wrong. And they will agree, well, this is a problem for Jimmy. But if Philly is going after him full bore and they're offering him max, I think that will be something that teams sort of mitigate. And Kevin Love, you're right. He wasn't initially comfortable with his role, and it took him a long time to find peace with what was being asked of him. He was still voicing it. It's just that he had a different style of doing that. He approached it differently. You have to know that Jimmy's going to be a guy who's going to be all fire and come at you direct all the time. That's who he is. So, again, if he had not had the issues he had, I don't even care that he's uncomfortable where he's at right now. It's fine. But to your point, because he's done it so many times, he could potentially cost himself money if he doesn't eventually assimilate and be somebody who helps them win basketball games.
I just think that one of my favorite boxers is Miguel Cotto, and he had a line when he was talking to another fighter. He said, in every fight I was in, I've always known what side I was, whether I was the A side or the B side. I don't think Jimmy Butler realizes sometimes what side he's on. He's the B side. He's acting like he's the A side. You can't come in here talking about, hey, I want to be used this way and I want this, that, and the third. This is Joel Embiid's team. You need to do things in a more diplomatic type of way. You need to talk to Joel. You need to figure out how we're going to play together. But you have to understand, everything runs through the big fella. And I don't think that Jimmy Butler is all the way on board with that.
So, Brendan, we've fully explored Jimmy Butler's side of this, but you see the Brett Brown quote on the screen. I didn't think it went over the line. If it did, I would have addressed it.
He has to say that, though.
So for Brett Brown going forward, the rest of the guys on the team, whether it's Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons, the other people he has to deal with, is this something that may hamper his job going forward if Jimmy Butler is able to speak out in this way and there's not repercussions?
No question. We don't know if it went over the line or if it didn't. But here, let's just say for devil's advocate, it went over the line. He's officially just lost that locker room because now no one respects him. If it went over the line and people think it went over the line and then he comes out and covers and says, oh, no, it didn't go over the line, it's okay, and he doesn't check Jimmy, now people think you're soft. And now what happens, the ripple effect is when Brett Brown wants to yell at Landry Shamet, he's going to be looking up there like, you don't talk to Jimmy like that. Don't come at me all hard. Don't with all that fire. And coaches slowly but surely, the trust erodes away and people just start looking at you like, yeah, whatever. And that's what happens. And that's part of this as well. Jimmy has to understand when he does this, it's not just about Jimmy. That's part of the problem. I think he's living in a Jimmy world and he's only thinking about Jimmy Butler. He's like the NBA's version of Antonio Brown.
We talked about this when they brought him in. They were absolutely increasing both their ability to be really good out of timeout late and design some things that opponents can't deal with. And they were also really increasing their volatility. And Jimmy brings that 100%. There's no question because of how hot he runs. I look at this, though, and I think a team that's this good, they're 25-14 overall. They're playing at a very high level in general terms since Jimmy got there. When you come into the season with the expectations they had, and the only thing that's going to spell success for you is making it to a finals or at least an Eastern Conference Finals, you're either all the way with me or you're all the way against me. So where this becomes interesting is come trade deadline, if they've got people in that room that are against them, they need to act on it because that's the one thing that unequivocally derails a season. This kind of thing is adversity, which is opportunity. You galvanize from this or you get radically worse, but at least it reveals something to you. Where this becomes actually meaningful, and I liked his quote saying what he said, but when this becomes actually meaningful is, A, if you're right about losing the locker room, which certainly I don't think you can say he's done to this point, but if they're not all the way on board with what's being asked of them as a team, then Elton Brand's going to have to start to jettison some of those pieces who aren't. And that's when this becomes intriguing to me.
Well, that's the problem. I think the pieces that you're talking about is Jimmy Butler.
Wow, they just acquired him, 21 games ago?
It was all good just a week ago.
Mavericks, one of those games, one of 8 games tonight. Also, the Raptors-Bucks, this game we're waiting for, 8:30 right here on NBA TV. That guy, Nikola Jokic, had himself a game. Highlights coming your way. Round 3 between Milwaukee and Toronto. The first 2 games between these two teams felt like a heavyweight championship. Will tonight feel the same way? Let's welcome in Matt Velasquez from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel for more insight. Bucks became the first team in NBA history to have 12 different players score 8 or more points in Friday night's win. What does that tell you about the depth of this team?
I mean, the Bucks just have a lot of guys who can fill in, put the ball in the bucket, and do it in a lot of different ways. I mean, they were throwing out kind of weird combinations. Obviously, when you get up by as many as 46, you're trying to, keep everybody fresh for the back-to-back and throw different players out there. But no matter who they put out there and what the combinations they had, guys were moving the ball well, trusting each other, and finding ways to score. And so, that deep level of trust, being able to translate up and down the lineup, is definitely a positive for Milwaukee so far this season.
It's one thing for that to happen in a blowout win, but a lot of teams rely on their best player to take the last shot at the end of close games. With the Bucks, we've seen that's not always the case. Outside of Giannis, who does this team have the most trust in taking a late game shot?
I think if it's a last shot of the game, especially if you need a three, you'd probably see the ball in Chris Middleton's hands. They've done that a couple times so far this year. If it's crunch time and they need somebody to create something off the dribble, then you might see the ball in Eric Bledsoe's hands, maybe running a pick and roll with Giannis, and then kind of creating off that. He had a bunch of games early in the season where he was doing some things in the last few minutes of close games to help them close it out. But Giannis is still a pretty good closer in his own right. He's shooting a high percentage in those crunch time minutes, getting a lot of dunks, getting to the free throw line. And, in recent games, he's put down some jumpers, too. So they have a lot of options, and you can never count out, obviously, Brook Lopez, chucking up 30-footers and kind of cutting teams deep with those shots.
There are so many positive stats surrounding this team right now, but the one that matters most, they've won 9 of their last 10, approaching the halfway point of the season. Are they all starting to feel some of the weight of raised expectations because they seem to be playing loose?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think they're really affected by that. I think they've really kind of hunkered down and kind of kept that game at a time mentality, as cliche as it might be. I think it kind of helps that we're here in Milwaukee. This is a smaller market. This isn't New York. It's not LA. It's not Chicago or Golden State or any of those other places where maybe the microscope would be a little bit more heated. But for them, they're just kind of playing loose, having fun, doing what they've been doing all season, and just kind of rolling as the wins come through.
And it looks like that train is just going to roll through the season. Matt Velasquez, appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it.
Well, Philadelphia will take the court at 7:30. Jimmy Butler will not be on it. What are we going to learn about Ben Simmons and company against the Dallas Mavericks? We'll chop it up next.
Think you shoot your three tonight?
No.